This is update for January 8, 2023, day 319 of the war, end of the date update. This is actually also catch-up update for January 6 and 7. Things were actually surprisingly active and developing, not in Ukrainian favor. I'll get to those once we get to the front line. And actually, we're gonna pretty much focus on Ukraine, even though there are things in Taiwan that are not going well. But for today, it's going to be focused just on Ukraine. And as a heads up, next weekend I will not be able to do updates either. So just hopefully I covered all organizational questions. Now let's check what's going on with Ukrainian power grid. There were no major attacks. It's hanging in. It's in coma, but more stable, let's say. Stable coma. If things continue the way they are, it may be, I would say, slowly coming back from coma. I'm not saying that it's going to be working perfectly, but, it's definitely not going to be going in the opposite direction of sort of falling apart so far. Then Ukraine, there was an announcement that Ukraine received 50 Bradley IFEs, which is definitely net positive for Ukraine. It's not going to change the situation, but as they say, every bit helps. There are other, weapons there, sort of 1855 millimeter howitzers, but those, for the most part, just I'd say replenishment of the losses. So essentially, there's no essential increase in the artillery pieces. It's just maintaining the status quo. And then there were, I think, like 3605 millimeter howitzers, which is obviously totally outdated, and it's I would say military junk, in my opinion. I mean, definitely they better than nothing, obviously, but overall, it just, I would say, West sometimes gets rid of, military junk by dumping it in Ukraine, unfortunately. At the same time, it's really Ukrainian fault. It's not, it's nobody else's fault except for Ukraine. In terms of situation in Belarus, there is increasing build-up of the Russian troops, but more so equipment rather than troops. That's sort of interesting kind of, I'd say, detail. It's more so they pumping in more equipment there. Now let's actually start walk through the front line. Gonna do in a clockwise fashion as we always do, starting from very north and then going down south. Situation along the state border more or less the same. Exchange of artillery fire, exchange of all sort of adversarial activities. Nothing unusual, sort of normal situation there. Now let's look at North Lugansk front line. Things here pretty much status quo, unchangeable. Some Russian attacks in this on this road from Kupiansk to Svatove, then towards Makiivka, and then Ukrainian attack here south of Dibrova in the attempt to sort of basically get to Kremina and essentially, cross the river here, essentially. None of these attacks went anywhere by either Russian side or Ukrainian side. So essentially at this point, it's status quo on this front line and without, let's say, clear pass out of it, except for, if there are more Russian troops arriving, which obviously they should be starting, in the next couple of weeks, we probably will see some changes. Then let's look at North Donbass front line. Things here are really deteriorating pretty badly for Ukrainian side. The key point here was, so say on the, I believe on the 6th, Russian troops really advanced here, capturing most of the Soledar, even though I will look at the in detailed map here, so it's kind of better understood. But all I just want to say is on the 6th, essentially, there was this progress here on Solidar, and then on the 7th, there was Russian progress here, capturing most of the Pidhorodne. The key to success, actually, in Soledar for Russian side was actually capturing Yakovlivka, which was, I think, captured about like, I want to say 20 days ago, and actually attack. If you see this attack here, and success here on this attack, that effectively forced the hands of Ukrainian command, and they had to pull the troops out of this whole long appendix here, starting in Bahmutske. So Bahmutske was surrendered, and then most of the Soledar. But let's actually look at the situation. So this is how the front line was looking. Initially, as you can see, this is Yakovlivka, right? This is most of the Solidar, and then Bahmutske, Ukrainian troops controlled significant portion of it. Let's put it this way. This was at the beginning. The first one was in this domino was fall of Yakovlivka, which, as I said, was about between 15 to 20 days ago. And then on the 6th, it's really starting to sort of deteriorate pretty quickly. Russian troops first managed to get to this like kind of like intermediate line, and at the same time there was attack developing along this line from Yakovlivka to the northeastern part of Solidar. So just to better understand, Solidar is kind of like a long, it's kind of like this long ellipse, if you really think about this way. The key in Solidar is actually this western part, which is still being controlled by Ukrainian troops, where there are salt mines. There is salt mine 1 through 3, then there is salt mine 4 somewhere here, and then there's salt mine 7. So essentially, this is a salt mine sort of town. And the salt mines, as I said before, are pretty, well, not easy, but it's a great defensive position, let's put it this way. Whether Ukrainian troops are going to use it or not, that's another question. But in theory, I would even say it's more like excellent defensive position. But anyway, so on the 6th, the situation really started deteriorating pretty quickly. Russian troops managed to sort of advance here in the eastern part of Solidar. Ukrainian side lost also completely all of the Bahmutske. So there was kind of like intermediate line, defensive line, that Ukrainian troops established, and then really they fall back all the way to this mine, 1 through 3. This is the mine here, which is a key mine here, and so this is where the front line is. Essentially, also this attack from Yakovlivka allowed Russian troops also to capture a significant portion of the, call it like city center, I guess I would call this way. This whole area, this quarter here. So and obviously then this whole area was kind of lost in this, as a package, basically, to losing most of the Solidar and losing Bakhmutsk essentially. So the front line, very unclear where it is exactly in this area, but very clear that the front line is on the eastern outskirts of Krasna Hora here. So this is the situation in Solidar. That was really developing, probably even more starting on the 5th, and then on the 6th, and really on the 7th it was pretty bad, to the point that Ukrainian command had to bring in here 46th Airborne Brigade to stabilize situation. For how, like, this is, as you can see, this is the situation here in Solidar. It's still kind of like almost salient, Ukrainian salient, which in theory defendable, but we'll see how defendable, let's put it this way. But this is what's being lost here. Then Russian troops attacked and captured on the 7th Pidhorodne, most of the Pidhorodne. So again, it helped them also kind of like solidify this whole gain in Solidar and worsen Ukrainian position around Bahmut. It's not sort of done, but it's definitely sort of next step in losing Bahmut for Ukrainian side. So this is just another look at the same. So as I said, essentially this whole line, this whole stretch of the front line really collapsed, and also Russian troops main gains and to get to outskirts of eastern outskirts of Rozdolivka. So as you can see, this whole situation is, I would say, it is collapse of the front line. It was for now stamped by 46th Brigade. For how long it will be able to hold on, unclear. The essence of this whole problem is what I said before: is that Wagner mercenaries, as organization, have no match on the Ukrainian side from as organization, right? Because there are a lot of motivated soldiers at the on the ground level in Ukraine. There's definitely many more than on the Russian side, but organizationally, Wagner mercenaries is sort of light years ahead of Ukrainian army, which is a Soviet army, and that's the whole point I'm trying to make. Is that, as you can see, all of these advances here in general on the front line are really where Wagner mercenaries operating. Yeah, they lose a lot of their I'll say mercenaries, members of this group, and it's sort of like very bloody machine, but it gets a result, and in the end, that's what really matters in this whole situation. So as I said, this is not over. This is just sort of another building block in this tragedy for Ukrainian side. And basically, Ukrainian command, Ukrainian army, Ukrainian sort of society as a system is in strategic dead end because it has no adequate answer to Wagner mercenaries from organizational point of view. And so this losses will continue as long as there is no organizational answer. Yes, there is another answer is to pump a lot of advanced military equipment to Ukrainian side, and we might be seeing beginning of that. We'll see, because it's very clear that to extent West is starting to panic. And panic means not just panic like saying, hey, let's just surrender, but panic means like, okay, let's finally throw in heavy equipment and let's get it done soon, because it's really creating a lot of pain for us, and it just really creating multiplying levels of the problems from all angles throughout the system in the West. And so remains to be seen, and that's why I said the Bradleys are sort of first drop of in that bucket of potentially accelerating military help that's exceeds Russian military technically, right? Quantity and in quantity, it probably will never exceed Russians in Russian side in quantity, but let's say having 200 Abrams or 200, another 200 Leopard tanks are really going to change significantly the whole situation on this front line, and also having more artillery. At the same time, there's a very clear problem. There's a very clear bottleneck in the West in terms of production capabilities, production capacities to produce 155 millimeter shells. And part of the problem in the West is also high level of monopolization in the military-industrial complex, which makes it incapable and very expensive. And that's sort of West is sort of facing its own internal problem that's unclear how it's going to get resolved. So as you can see, this is whole, all of these problems are, and Russia is facing its own problems. Doesn't mean that Russia is doing perfectly, everything's great. No, there's tons of problems there, and how this is going to play out, basically all of these problems are going to collide and will be called to be resolved. How the final resolution is going to look like is remains to be seen. We'll see how it is, but it's not clearly decided one side versus another. That's what I want to sort of make it clear to anyone, that this is not done deal for either side, and really will depend on the well of each side. Then Russian troops, Wagner mercenaries again, were attacking a little bit south of Bahmut, Klishivka and Kurdyumivka in this area. There were no advances so far. That's going to be another extremely dangerous. So there's advance here. This will bring Russian troops very close to capturing Bahmut. As a whole, it's not, just from strategic perspective, like losing Bahmut is not going to change anything strategically for Ukrainian side. It will mean a lot psychologically. It will create an internal sort of fight and struggles, and that is actually much more dangerous than sort of really physically losing Bahmut. Sort of basically those indirect and sort of invisible effects are much more stronger and dangerous than just physically losing Bahmut. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on at the central Donbass front line. So here, so you can see there are concentrated Russian attacks here out of Pisky salient, then around Marinka, north-south, center, and then Novomikhailivka. And as you can see, they're not achieving anything even close to Wagner mercenaries. Because you remember, all of these attacks were happening, in parallel to attacks by Wagner mercenaries. So basically the same timing, the same pace and everything. And the achievements are extremely minimal, with the exception of this Pisky set, and essentially no achievement. And that's what I would like to highlight here. Again, if you have regular army versus one Soviet army versus another Soviet army, results are pretty much sort of a draw, right? Bloody draw, but it's a draw. If you have more advanced organizational structure, which is Wagner mercenaries, then that's what really drives the result. So I just want to highlight and contrast this area versus up north, just to kind of like drive it even more, the problem that Ukraine is facing, basically. Now let's look at Zaporizhya front line. So things here are quiet, no essential changes, and remains to be seen what's going to happen here. In the past, this was very likely area of Ukrainian potential offensive. Then at this point, that offensive is probably off the table for some time. Unclear for how long. By the way, those Bradleys, sorry to say that, those Bradleys are going to show up on the front line sometime. Earliest is early March. So they won't be there for another months and a change. I would say almost 2 months, essentially. So again, the reason for that is heavy losses on the Ukrainian side in this, call it Bahmut Soledar mid grinder or North Donbass mid grinder, which again brings the point that the Russian side achieved its results by actually destroying offensive capabilities or potential of the Ukrainian army, or not destroying, but significantly reducing it, to the point that probably Ukraine will be doing more mobilization, more active mobilization. Russia is also not doing great. They also need more. So the both sides are facing the situation when Russia will need to do more mobilization as well, simply because for them to do any large-scale attack, they don't have enough troops right now. And like any large-scale offensive is out of question for Russia right now, and for them to force the hand of Ukraine and the West, they need to launch large offensive and achieve some big result. Without that, Russia is actually also in strategically difficult situation. So both sides are sort of forced, to intensify the conflict. That's essentially how situation drives both sides at this point. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.